Turn up the dial, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the alley, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, all my weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and as always, I'm delighted and grateful that you've decided to spend the next hour of your life with me, whether it's live when we go out Tuesday nights, 9 p.m. Central, on Facebook and X and YouTube, of course, or whether you're watching the show where it's archived after that date and time on any of those sites, or perhaps you're listening to the audio-only version, which drops on the Wednesday. Wherever and whenever you're listening, thank you for joining me. I hope you're also thinking about maybe joining me at the Crossing Realms Conference this September 19 to 20 in Richmond, Virginia. It's going to be an amazing time. There's going to be so many fantastic speakers. I'm going to be screening my short documentary, The Shaver Mystery, which is kind of a little extract from the upcoming feature documentary of mine, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers. In fact, tonight's guest is in both of those films, and we'll get to that in a moment. But I'll play the little blurb for the Crossing Realms Conference, which think about getting tickets, think about coming along. Conferences are fantastic. It's a great way to meet friends and to make new friends. So I hope to see many of you there. Wrong one. I'll repeat that again. I hope to see many of you at the Crossing Realms Conference, and I'll play the blurb now.
Crossing Realms Conference is coming this September 19th and 20th to the Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. Tickets to this landmark event are on sale right now at Eventbrite. The powerful speaker lineup will cover topics from Bigfoot, UFOs, and aliens, so you will not want to miss attending this amazing two-day inaugural event. Again, that's the Crossing Realms Conference, this September 19th and 20th at the Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. Please mark your calendar and get your tickets before they vanish. Space is limited.
We're very grateful too that the Untold Radio Network is the major sponsor of that event. So I hope to see you all there. Somebody else I would hope to see there, but I'm not sure if I will. I know he's speaking at a number of upcoming events, which we'll get to, is tonight's guest, a good friend of mine. He's been fascinated by the unexplained for half a century. There were two major events that inspired his interest in this. Growing up in Michigan, the March 1966 UFO flap occurred virtually in his backyard. The following November, a winged humanoid chased two couples down a lonely country road near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and the legend of the Mothman was born. Tonight's guest would be chasing the Mothman the rest of his life. Influenced primarily by John Keel and Jacques Vallee, his views on UFOs became unconventional and moved toward a more paranormal explanation. His main area of research is what some call high strangeness, or window areas, as Keel dubbed them, where disparate types of paranormal phenomena all seem to occur in the same location. And he believes that studying these paranormally active locations may well be the key to understanding the origin of the manifestations themselves. He has his own podcast called The High Strangeness Factor on the Paranormal UK radio network, and is a correspondent on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files, which can be found on that same network. He currently lives in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I still have to visit him there. I really want to get down there sometime. And he works at the Mothman Museum. He's also writing a book, as yet untitled, that deals with the underlying patterns that connect different types of paranormal phenomena throughout history. So I'm just delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird my very good friend, the one, the only, Steve Ward.
Great to be back, Dean. Thanks for having me.
Man, it's always such a great show when I get to chat with you for an hour. A great time whether I chat with you on the show or personally, but at least here everybody can hear our weirdness and our strangeness, which is good. What have you been up to since we last chatted, Steve?
Well, I'm going to be talking at a library tomorrow in Newark, Ohio, where they have that fantastic mound that they didn't destroy when they built the town, at the local library there at about 6:30, I guess it is. So as we talked about off air, a good friend of mine made me a PowerPoint, because I'm incapable of doing it myself at this point. So, but originally, you want to put in so much. I mean, I could have easily, you and I can easily do 2.5 hours on a subject and just barely scratch the surface. So I've got that going. I've got another library event coming up in October. I haven't done any libraries at this point. I've done a lot of speaking at different conventions and so forth. I was at the guys from Wild and Weird, West Virginia, Ron Lanham and Joe Perdue. Really good guys. I mean, I saw some pretty incredible things. We were out in the Chief Cornstalk hunting grounds area, wow, south of Point Pleasant, around Gallipolis Ferry. And I don't recall the types of equipment we used, but we were looking at stuff that looked a little bit like that Tic Tac video that you see over and over again. I mean, stuff I've never. I'm the guy that doesn't see UFOs, pretty much. A few odd things in the sky, nothing to write home about. But that night, it was just amazing, the stuff that I saw. And so they had an event that they're going to have a monthly event down around South Charleston. And so they had several speakers, and I talked about some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. The John Keel's Silent Contactees and Joe Fisher's Hungry Ghosts. Very interesting topics. So anyway, they're really a credit to the paranormal community. They do some really great research. I spoke off the cuff last year. They had a workshop out in the TNT area. The TNT area, for those who don't know, is about 9 miles north of Point Pleasant. It was originally called the West Virginia Ordnance Works, I believe, but it's where they made explosives for World War II. And forever, it's been nicknamed the TNT area. In the Mothman Museum, where I work on Saturdays, we have directions for people to how to get out there if they want to. I tell them if they want to test their mettle, you take your family, take your friends out to the TNT area, and I always say something silly like, "And the chicks really dig it." Actually, they do. It's now it's the McClintock Wildlife Area. It's very creepy. It's the general area where the Mothman was seen originally, and when we do the hayride on Saturday night during the Mothman Festival, that's the general area we take people out to. So it's just a lot of fun. So I spoke out there last year on all things Mothman, but I don't think I got into the, the silent contactees are an area that is often overlooked. And that's what the prophecies part of the Mothman prophecies means. People talk about the Mothman, of course, and the UFOs, the Men in Black, even the some of the animal mutilations that occurred during that time. But the silent contactees I found very intriguing.
I'm going to give you the stage now, Stephen. Maybe just fill in for those of our audience who aren't familiar with Keel's work and aren't familiar with what the silent contactees. Just fill everybody in a little bit about that, because it's fascinating. So you have the stage, my friend.
John Keel lived in Long Island, and he's no longer with us. He died in 2009, easily a century ahead of everybody else in piecing things together. The book that I tell people over and over again, and people that have heard me are probably tired of hearing it, but Operation Trojan Horse. It actually came out before the Mothman prophecies. The Mothman prophecies, nobody was interested in his findings in Point Pleasant. So it was 7 years later, his editor came to him and said, you've got to write a book on the Mothman. And Keel actually reluctantly did it. He had left the Mothman behind. So as he says, he dragged out his tattered briefcase and pieced together that book, which they cut half out of. But he came down in the first major sighting of the Mothman was November 15th, 1966. Two couples, the Scarberries and the Mallets, were out in this TNT area by the old North Power Plant, and the road right next to it. The North Power Plant was demolished in the 90s, but by that time in the 60s, you can see the old photographs of the West Virginia Ordnance Works, these old black and white photographs, and what a huge complex it was. But by the 60s, not all the structures, but most of them were torn down. So they're on this road, and they're two married couples, and it's kind of a lover's lane. There's a lot of people parking out there. But Linda said, "What's that man doing standing in the middle of the road?" And we know the details of this now because Jeff Walmsley, who runs the Mothman Museum and put this great little empire together and revitalized Point Pleasant. He years ago, Linda's no longer with us, but I was able to talk to her several times. He took her out there and said, "Now, Linda, tell me everything step by step that happened." So she saw this, what she thought was a man. The man spread his wings. They noticed the red eyes. This thing shuffled off toward the old North Power Plant. And of course, I'm condensing everything. They decided to leave. And as they went down the dirt road, turned right on the Fairgrounds Road and headed out to Route 62, made a left to go back into Point Pleasant. But there was a billboard sign there. They said they saw this thing, or maybe it's kissing cousin, I don't know, standing there. And then it flew and followed them. Now, there is a bit of an update on this. Linda Scarberry came forward in about 2006 and started attending Mothman festivals. Jeff Walmsley was her paper boy. So he asked her as a favor to come and talk to people about what she saw. And there were some other witnesses there. Steve and Mary Mallet had been quiet for over half a century. And Roger Scarberry, after all the initial interviews, he was quiet for over half a century. But last year, he came forward and talked to Jeff. He said, out of the clear blue, Jeff was surprised because he'd been trying to get a hold of him. He said, "I want to tell my story. I mean, I keep hearing people telling it, and they get it wrong." So Jeff had and that day, they set up the interview for the next day. I can't tell you much about it, but Jeff Walmsley said, "Roger, just tell me, did it really happen?" And he said, "It scared the hell out of us." So the next day I sat in on part of the interview. It's under double secret probation, and it will be in Jeff's next book. And also, Connie Carpenter is another lady. She's the one, if you've read the book, was driving past the Mason County Golf Course. She saw this thing standing there with wings, red glowing eyes. It took off straight like a helicopter, flew over her car. In the book, she described its face as she was unable to describe it adequately. She said it was science fiction like. And she came forward recently. So in this next book, which we're all anticipating, you're going to have two updated and more detailed accounts of their sighting. So that's really great. But that's how it started. John Keel heard about this, I believe, from Gray Barker. Of course, Gray Barker, who had the great publishing empire of Saucerian Publications. I still have a lot of his stuff. And I met him briefly at the 1976 MUFON Symposium. I can tell you about that later if you want. But he heard about it from Gray Barker. He thought this thing was just a big bird. And he jokes about it in the beginning of the Mothman Prophecies that he just thought it was a physical big bird of some kind. And so he said something like, I oiled up my 14-foot monster traps and headed off to Point Pleasant. Well, he hits Point Pleasant early in that December of 66. And one of the ladies gathers all these witnesses which were talking at the time: Stephen Mary Mallet, Linda and Roger Scarberry, Connie Carpenter. I don't know that if Marcella Bennett was there or not, but they were very cooperative, and he was able to talk one-on-one with all these people. One interesting thing, he knew Connie Carpenter, he said, was telling the truth because she had this eye burn, this conjunctivitis, which is normally associated with close encounters with UFOs or strange lights or whatever, but sometimes with cryptids. And Keel thought that was interesting, that they supposedly two different categories, UFOs, whatever they are, ET craft, and some kind of a cryptid, giving the person was receiving the same kind of symptoms. He also noticed that he said that people that saw either cryptids or UFOs or whatever would have dehydration, muscle ache, and so forth. There were certain commonalities in physical symptoms with supposedly two different types of subjects. So that's how Keel got started. And I invite people to read the Mothman Prophecies, even though it's there's some mistakes in it. I think some of them may not be Keel's fault. I suspect the faceless editors that he was always complaining about might have done some tweaking. I don't know. But, and also, again, half the manuscript was cut out. About 2/3 of that survives in The Eighth Tower, which is essentially a sequel. So that's how it all started. And that year, he came down 5 different times from New York. Linda Scarberry's parents allowed him to stay at their place to save him some money. And it's funny, I was talking to some of the locals about John Keel when he was there. I think he had a beard. Terrible to have a beard, right? This is in the 60s. He was considered like some kind of a beatnik or hippie or whatever. And, you should stay away from him. Denny Bellamy is a great guy who runs the Tourist Bureau. And it's he and Jeff have been instrumental in getting a lot of these documentaries into Point Pleasant. Well, Denny was telling me about how, he used to see John Keel was in one of these reclining chairs outside and, just staring up at the sky like he was looking for UFOs or something. But, and gosh, I just wish that, I was in junior high school in Michigan when that first major sighting took place. And the reason I read about it is it hit the wire services all over the world. You can go into the Mothman Museum and you can even see the Stars and Stripes military newspaper carry the article. But that was before Mothman had a proper name. He was just the bird back then. So Keel was off and running. I love the, he had, Colin Wilson said that John Keel was a natural writer and was incapable of writing a dull sentence. And so at the end of, I think, of the first chapter, he says, when he's going off to Point Pleasant, he says, it was like the opening of an old Max Schulman novel. bang, 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 bang. 4 bullets ripped into my groin, and it was often the greatest adventure of my life. Oh,
It's
God.
so great. And I agree. People should read the Mothman prophecies. I think my 3 favorite UFO books, not even because who knows if they're factual or whether they get right or what they get wrong. Who knows what any of the UFO books get right or wrong. But the 3 most entertaining UFO books, the 3 best written UFO books, I think, in history, and the ones which are most will draw you in the most, is the Mothman prophecies. Gray Barker, who you mentioned before, they knew too much about flying saucers, and Ray Palmer and Kenneth Arnold's The Coming of the Saucers, because they're great literature. They're exciting stories. They draw you in with the mystery and the weirdness. And I'll be honest, I don't think there's many UFO books written today which draw you in the way that the books that those men wrote draw you in.
Well, listen to the paragraph. I think I can quote it almost directly, but it's when the Garuda, of course, he saw as sort of symbolic of the Mothman, the winged deity from Islamic religion, and the original title for his book was going to be The Year of the Garuda, but those faceless editors decided it was going to be the Mothman Prophecies. I like the Mothman Prophecies better. I think it's more illustrative of what it's about.
Me too. Just quickly, Steve, too, just to butt in real fast, because you talked about Barker, who's a fascinating human being, and I recently had Gabriel McKee on talking about the Caesarean here, or the Caesarean, however you want to pronounce it, his new biography on Gray Barker.
Oh, yeah.
But Barker, of course, wrote the other Mothman prophecies book, or the other book about the Mothman's appearances in West Virginia, and that was The Silver Bridge, which isn't remembered as well and isn't as popularized as the Mothman prophecies by Keel, and is a very different book.
Yes.
But do you know who printed The Silver Bridge?
Pardon me?
Do you know who printed it? Like whose publishing company?
Oh, it was Palmer, right?
Yeah,
Palmer.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely right. Just down the road from me, Ray Palmer printed the first Mothman prophecies, the first Mothman book, which, because the Silver Bridge came out considerably earlier than the Mothman prophecies.
And I screwed up because it was I used to subscribe to Palmer Publications, and I saw it there. By the time I decided to get it, it was gone, and there was no internet where I could find it. Of course, they have republished it. Some have called it a celestial fairy tale. And some actually like the Silver Bridge better than the Mothman prophecies. And I want to take them out to the woodshed and cut up a switch and change their mind.
They're very different books. I'm fortunate enough to have. It's so expensive. It's the price of UFO books now. Vintage books are ridiculous. I had to get a copy of the Silver Bridge when I was doing the Palmer documentary. But they're very different. You know what I mean? I'm biased towards the Mothman prophecies as well, because it's the book that, like, I think maybe perhaps for you, it's the book that changed my perception on how you could look at the UFO phenomenon. And I read that before you mentioned before Operation Trojan Horse, which is probably the greatest UFO book ever written. I think it's a spectacular book, but I read the Mothman prophecies first, and the Mothman prophecies is certainly a more like adventure novel almost compared to Operation Trojan Horse. Like Operation Trojan Horse it's still well written and entertaining, but there's something about the Mothman prophecies which is just this ridiculous page turner that you just cannot put down.
Yes. The Operation Trojan Horse is almost like a textbook, you know. And I tell a lot of people, you may need to read Strange Creatures from Time and Space, titled more recently as The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. It kind of eases you into things like window areas or whatever. It's sort of like you're dipping your feet in the pool and getting used to the temperature, and then you can graduate to Operation Trojan Horse, which I resisted for a couple of years because I knew it was going to bust my extraterrestrial bubble, and I didn't want that to happen. But it's funny. When I was at the Michigan MUFON Symposium, 1976. Dr. Hynek was there. It was 10 years after the swamp gas fiasco in the same area. And by then, he had separated from Project Blue Book in the Air Force, didn't have those apron strings anymore, didn't have to straddle the fence. He had started the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois. And the name of his talk was swamp gas plus 10 and counting. And, he recounted those days, the mistakes he made. There was a serious talk, but there was a lot of humor in there. He showed us some of the cartoons at the time. In one of them, you see the little green men have just landed in their saucers. And there's an Earthman walking along the sidewalk. And they got their big blasters in their hand. And they say to him, take us to the one that called us marsh gas. So anyway, we had some fun with that. I even recorded these talks on cassette, and I have some of them on CD somewhere.
Wow.
But anyway, what I'm getting to is that in the lobby, you had the book tables on one side and where the speakers would stand on the other side. And Gray Barker was there. And a friend of mine had attended several years before that great convention in New York in '67, the Congress of Scientific Ufologists, run by James Moseley of Saucer News. And he met all these guys. He kind of became friends with Gray Barker. And when we had this sort of a little fanzine we published, he would swipe an illustration from Gray Barker and put it in the magazine. And then he'd call him later. He said, by the way, Gray, I used your illustration from whatever. And he says, okay, did you give credit to Saucerian Publications? Yeah. Okay, have a nice day. So
I have some copies of Barker's. Not Barker. I don't have any original Barkers, but I have some original Mosleys over there.
Oh, very good.
But
go ahead.
No. I was just going to say it's because Moseley. You probably know, but maybe some of the people who've been following my documentary might be interested. Is that Moseley, along with Gene Steinberg, Rick Hilberg, and Alan Greenfield, all drove to visit Ray Palmer in Amherst, Wisconsin.
Yes.
4 of perhaps the greatest ufologists of their time went to visit the master, and who was Ray Palmer, of course, after NICAP had kicked them out. Like NICAP had kicked the 3 of them because they hated. Moseley didn't even try to go to NICAP because he was kind of the opposition. So was Palmer, incidentally. So and we kind of had this weird whitewashed history where NICAP is the great guiding force of ufology in those early years, and the history books have almost written out the Mosleys and the Palmers and the other people who were looking at ufology in a very different way to the official way that NICAP was proposing. NICAP, of course, headed by Donald Kehoe, was very reluctant to look at the type of contactee reports that you were looking at. But people like Palmer and Moseley and Barker, they were all about these contactee reports.
Before I get back to Gray Barker, you mentioned James Moseley. If you want to know about those times, and more focused on the characters, the individuals, get a hold of Moseley's Shockingly Close to the Truth.
So good.
It's just a fantastic book. And again, it doesn't get too much into the theory of UFOs or whatever, a little bit, but he reveals so much in there about the various characters that wandered through that time. But so when I spotted Gray Barker, I thought, holy cow, Now, of course, they wouldn't have him speak there. He was too controversial. And even back then, MUFON didn't want anything to do with James Moseley, because here is Gray Barker has got a stack of his Saucerian publications in his hand that he's passing out, hoping he'll get some subscriptions. And it's got a picture on the front of Vegetable Man attacking somebody. A great story. And in there was he reprinted a letter where MUFON is rejecting Moseley's application to MUFON. Later on, he became a director, I think, for Florida, or oversaw. But they threw him out because he wasn't doing anything, according to himself. But
I met Moseley in Florida back in the day when I was in Clearwater doing my dissertation research. Moseley was, that's the same year I met Keel, but Moseley was an abject blast. Like, he just drank, told saucer stories, and some of the things I say are inappropriate. Some of the things he said were inappropriate for this family, type show. But he was just, I suspect, in the history of ufology, the most fun people to drink with. I never met Gray Barker like you did, but I suspect it was probably Gray Barker and Jim Moseley, just because they were both so entertaining.
Well, it must have been at the time he was doing Saucer Smear, which was kind of a newsletter, sort of the an incarnation of saucer news, and that was an absolute hoot. And I remember, he and Barker, they created so many hoaxes that still reverberate to this day. And I remember, I think the last issue he published before he died, he was going to reveal another one of the hoaxes. And I had to guess, well, which one might that be? So we never really found out. But when I cornered Gray Barker, I mean, I just had a million questions. I asked him if he knew that the friend of mine, Kevin, that he had met. He said, oh, yeah, he remembered. And I asked him about the Mothman prophecies and the Silver Bridge, because I had not read it. And I said I had heard that some people said that John Keel plagiarized him, just kind of, and of course he didn't. But he was this tall guy. He had this longish hair, which I'd only seen him in mostly pictures with close cropped hair. He had these very thick glasses on and a bit of astigmatism in one eye, and kind of a baggy suit. And when I walked into the room there, he had just dropped an F-bomb. He had made some kind of joke, which I think I missed or forgotten about, and everybody's cracking up. So that's how this all started. So I asked him, well, about the differences in the book, and I said that, did Keel steal from you? And he says, oh no, he says, none of us like to get our literary toes stepped on, but I'm sure John wrote his own book. Well, it turns out that John Keel said in a lecture, he said that when Gray Barker wrote the chapter about he and Barker being in West Virginia investigating, he got everything all wrong. So John Keel had to rewrite that chapter. So Keel actually did write part of the Silver Bridge.
Wow.
And I also asked him about, are you familiar with the UFO Warning by John Stewart, a Gray Barker publication?
No, I haven't read that.
Very sort of Benderish. Now Bender was one of the first guys to talk about the Men in Black, and they were very paranormal and supposedly manifesting in his room and so forth. Well, this particular UFO Warning was very much like that. It was a guy from New Zealand. And so I asked Barker about that. And he was very frank. He said, yeah, I think maybe that guy was doing a lot of this because this young lady in it, he was a little interested in her, and there might have been something going on or whatever. He just didn't hold back. And so it was really very cool, even though it was just a few minutes. I actually got to talk to him and meet him for a short time.
Yeah, I would have. I'm envious. I would have loved to have met Barker. I mean, I'm grateful that I got to meet some of them. Of course, Palmer and Shaver were the two I would have loved to have met most, but I was a tiny little boy when they passed. You and I we might even loop back to this depending how the show goes. But I did promise people Hungry Ghosts as well. So maybe we need to segue into Hungry Ghosts, and I'll give you the stage again to chat.
Let's start with the silent contactees, and then we could easily morph into Hungry Ghosts.
Okay, let's do silent. Yeah, let's do more than the silent contactees, and then we go to the Hungry Ghosts.
Okay, let's see. Well, in the Mothman prophecies, John Keel was in contact with a lot of people, and a lot of them were up in Long Island area, and he met a lot of them through a woman named Jay Perro. Jay Perro, don't think that's her real name. But she was one of these silent contactees. She was a broadcaster at WBAB, I think, on Long Island. And she was reporting on a lot of the mysterious stuff going on a place called Mount Misery. And John Keel met a lot of these people that he called silent contactees. The reason he called them silent contactees was that while they firmly were convinced they were in contact with some kind of space brother or other intelligence, they weren't the least bit interested in any publicity, publishing any books or whatever. And as time went on, they would get predictions that sometimes would come true. One woman, he said, was they were given tasks, goals sometimes. She was supposed to try to find some kind of a crucifix in Brooklyn that was supposed to bring forth peace and prosperity or something like that. But as time went on, he would get predictions. They would coalesce, and these people didn't all know each other. And a lot of it was focused on the Pope. The Pope was going to go to the Mideast and be knifed. And then John Keel heard that the Pope really was going to visit the Mideast. And there was going to be an earthquake that would happen in Turkey. And sure enough, this earthquake did happen. And the announcement was that the Pope was going to go to some particular area in the Mideast, Istanbul. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. So Keel, by this time, is getting super paranoid. Chapter 16 of the Mothman Prophecies is called Paranoiacs Are Made, Not Born. And when I listened to John being interviewed by Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM in 2002, with the advent of the movie being released, he talked about how how the film really captured the paranoia at the time. So in this one particular instance, he heads out to Mount Misery with a bunch of water. Now, I think he headed out there in the country because maybe he didn't want to be stuck in the city, because they were predicting horrible things, 3 days of darkness after the Pope was knifed and so forth. So on the way out there, he stops and sees one of the contactees he's in contact with all the time. And the contactee said, John, I got this really strange message from his contact, his space brother or whoever it was. And he said, tell John we'll meet him out there and help him drink all that water. So, and then he's coming back, and he stops at a motel randomly out there near Mount Misery. And there's all kinds of messages for him. He hadn't planned to go there, and they're all nonsensical. So even if some government agency was messing with him, how did they figure out he was going there? And then later on, it gets worse and worse. There's another. The silent contactees forget about the Pope for a while, and then they start talking about this EM effect that's going to come about maybe in December, and no explanation as to what the EM effect is. And so again, these predictions are all coalescing, and then it gets more focused. It says, well, it's going to be December 15th. And again, there's I think 3 days of darkness. I don't know if there are earthquakes or anyway, it's going to be bad stuff. And then they said, well, it's going to actually happen at the moment President Johnson lights the Christmas tree on the White House lawn. Now, again, I'm really shortening this because this slowly built up. And also, he was getting the message that there was going to be a terrible tragedy on the Ohio River. He thought it was going to be a factory blowing up or something. He told us to Mary Heyer, the reporter, his friend and colleague that wrote Where the Waters Mingle and covered, Mothman stories, Men in Black stories, and UFOs. And he said, Mary, don't tell anybody about this. If something happens, they're going to come right after us. So again, he's this time he's holed up in his New York apartment. He's got jugs of water there. He's ready. And President Johnson lights the Christmas tree, and then nothing happens. A few moments later, there's a bulletin that says a bridge has collapsed at Gallipolis, Ohio. Now, the bridge actually didn't go over to Gallipolis at that time. It was further upstream, went over to Kanawha from Point Pleasant. Keel knew right away it was the Silver Bridge, and he was furious. Whatever this was, this intelligence or whatever, knew something was going to happen. Maybe even it knew specifically what was going to happen, but he was misdirected. He couldn't, some people think that Mothman was a harbinger. I don't know about that. If all you're doing is chasing cars and scaring the hell out of people, and you have some kind of information that maybe you could impart through telepathy or something to people saying the bridge is in danger of collapsing, that would mean something. But that's how that happened. And very briefly, there's a couple of books that have been printed, the Big Breakthrough and the Big Blackout. It's material that was gathered that Doug Skinner has collected from John Keel's apartment after he died. And it gets much more into the silent contactee part. During this time period, Keel was really buying into this, and he was super paranoid. A lot of the stuff, fortunately, did not make it into the Mothman Prophecies. Some of it did. You could tell some of it was material that would coalesce down into the Mothman Prophecies. He talks a lot about Jay Perro, and he thinks, is she putting me on? I think a lot of these people were not actually having physical contact with entities. They were kind of channeling these messages. They were getting information from I don't know, the cosmic soup or whatever. But he would ask over and over again, is she putting me on? And then he would say more than once, well, there's things that she knows that she couldn't possibly know. So, but then later on, he kind of redeems himself in the eighth tower. He says, I'm embarrassed that I was out there in the dark talking to talking to these strange voices, channeling through these people and buying into it. There was one time when he takes Jay Perro out to Mount Misery. I don't know why they went out there, but he's asking her questions about this Mr. Apple, Apol. He's kind of like if you've seen the movie, Indrid Cold is a big character. Well, some of that stuff that sort of happened was Mr. Apple. And so he has hypnotized Jay Perro. He's trying to find out more information about these entities, these characters that she's supposedly in contact with. Then all of a sudden, Mr. Apple comes through with this deep baritone. And he doesn't want to give him any good information. He wants to know about Marilyn Monroe and the Kennedys. And so Keel writes, I wasn't interested in gossip. I wanted to get some real information. So in any way, we can kind of segue now into a fascinating book by Joe Fisher.
But before we do,
Okay.
can I just want to ask you one question, because Horace Smith, Professor Emeritus of Astronomy and Physics at Michigan State University, asked a question for you, and he said, how hard is it to place events around Mothman and the bridge collapse in proper chronological order? Is that hard, Steve, or not
really? A lot of people, Keel talked to a little over 100 people that year, the year of the Garuda, when there was another man named, I think, Franzen, a Swedish investigator that Keel had been in contact with, gave Keel a lot of information about the mysterious ghost planes in Sweden in the 30s. And he followed Keel into Point Pleasant. He talked to another 30 witnesses, and many of them were experiencing poltergeist phenomena after they saw the creature, the Mothman. So it's not really that difficult, although things seem to kind of disappear, the UFOs and the Mothman, after the bridge collapse. But it may be, some good friends of mine, Bill and Jackie Kuselis, have written Bridging the Tragedy, and they've dealt with the aftermath of the bridge collapse, people that survived it, people that were devastated economically. And so I think that, I don't think it's really difficult at all.
Jackie and Bill are great. I'm fortunate enough to be in their next book, actually, their book.
Oh, very good.
I don't know what the title is yet, but it's about paranormal experiences and trauma.
Right.
And they came to Pittsville, near where I am. They came to because it's kind of the center of the state, and I went and met them there, and they did a library event there, and we did an interview for their book, which was great. So it was. I'm looking forward to that one. I think they're going to launch that at the Mothman Prophecy, not the Mothman Prophecy, the Mothman Festival.
Yeah, they'll be speaking at the Mothman Festival.
Yeah, so I think they're going to launch that book at some stage there. Anyway, Hungry Ghosts, though, let's rewind and go into that segue, which you were about to do.
Yes, and it was reprinted about 10 years later called The Siren Call of the Hungry Ghost, and he added a chapter. He was in contact, he was a journalist in Canada. He became in contact with a medium named Elviva, I think he called her. I believe that was a pseudonym. And she was having sessions where a entity named Russell, who was supposed to have been a sheep herder, a couple hundred years ago, he was kind of like the director of all the other entities that were coming through. People would gather in a group, and they would find out who their guide was. And Joe supposedly found out his guide was a lady from Greece that he had been in contact with over several incarnations. And the others were finding their own guides. And eventually they would come through Russell, and eventually they would speak in their own voice with their own accent, all coming through this medium. Well, over 3 years, Joe gathers all kinds of information. There's another one, I think it was Ernest, who was World War II pilot, was shot down. He's getting all this information from what happened in England in World War II, and this lady supposedly from Greece, and he's falling in love with this entity or whatever, and his actual relationships are suffering. Well, again, a long story short, it's a fascinating book. He goes to England, he goes to Greece several times he goes through the archives, he talks to people that would know, and he finds some of the information, just like the silent contactees, that would give certain predictions about plane crashes or whatever that would actually happen. Some of the information was dead on accurate, that you couldn't really know just naturally. And some of it was absolutely dead wrong. This woman told him that she knew of this woman, the particular city, I think Alexandropolis, okay? And she described it being there, that she had visited 100 years before it was actually founded. So, he's very disappointed with a couple of the, in quotes, men entities that he's checking on, the World War II pilot and the sheep herder and others. And he even comes back and confronts them through the medium. And they're telling him, no, he's made a mistake. It's all on him. It's all his fault. And then, but he goes to Greece, and he's thinking that, that this woman he's kind of in love with, and he thinks she wouldn't let him down. And then he finds out that she has lied, or whatever it is, has lied to him. And then he contacts one of the men that was in this group with him. They go out for coffee. He wondered why this guy left the group. He had been kind of a healer for Aviva that had some issues with leukemia, and he was kind of easing her pain through some kind of techniques. Well, he told him that they started on him about his wife, that his wife was stabbing him in the back, was bringing him down, was draining his energy, and he's buying into this for a while. And his wife becomes a pariah. She used to bring them food and snacks to this group, and they don't want anything to do with her. They're buying into these messages coming through this medium, through Russell, this guy Russell. And Russell is a liar too. And then there was he contacted another medium. Was it Dr. Pinkerton was supposed to be her guy, and he had talked to Dr. Pinkerton, and Dr. Pinkerton had told him, well, see, I told you that they were going to these spirits were deceptive, and you would be disappointed when you went to England and Greece. And so Joe Fisher checks on this guy, this Pinkerton, and finds out he's lied about whatever this is. I say he is lied about his life. So it's all a massive deception mixed in with some truth. And it's the same, I want to tell people that if you're messing with the Ouija board, you think it's some kind of other intelligence. Some of these channeled books, I think you look at A Course in Miracles, it seems like it's at a higher vibration than something like OASP, just my opinion. Just be very cautious, with this. And the end of this is, you think when you read this book that Joe has overcome this. He survived this emotional turmoil. But you find out that after he republished that second book with the extra chapter, he told his doctor, he said they were still after him. The hungry ghosts were still after him for publishing these books. And he ended up committing suicide.
Gosh.
He jumped off a cliff. And it's just horrible. And so be aware, proceed cautiously when you're dealing with the hungry ghosts.
Well, I always think of G.K. Chesterton, who was a famous English novelist of the late 19th, early 20th century. And he has a quote, which I won't try to quote exactly, I'll get it wrong, but it was essentially that whatever these things are telling you, whether they're good or bad or something else, whatever they are, they tell you lies. And I think that Mothman prophecies bears that out. The hungry ghost stuff you were talking about bears that out. Chesterton's own experiences bears that out again and again and again. I think our interactions with the other, whatever that is, whether it presents itself as extraterrestrials or whether it presents itself as the ghost of great Aunt Gertrude, whatever it presents itself as, the deception there is very strong, and it's people are very foolish, I think. Not, but I mean, I shouldn't say they're foolish. They're fooled, which is unfortunate, because they want to believe that these things are being sincere, but these things are disingenuous. Whatever it is, whatever power, whatever force, whether it's psychological, sociological, external from us, whatever it is, there's a lot of deception wrapped up in it.
I'm going to be the MC again this year at the Mothman Festival. And I'm also, I also set up a few, we have this great TNT hayride where the men in black try to turn you away as soon as you go in with bullhorns. And they, if this is a restricted area, turn around. I tell people they're more like the Keystone Cops than the men in black. And guaranteed fly over the Mothman. It's a couple guys that hide in the old acid plant and rig up this great deal where Mothman will fly over. I go in ahead of time and set up a bunch of cobbled together creepy crawlies. I feel like a young Dr. Frankenstein putting together critters and lighting up their eyes and so forth.
Fantastic.
So I'm working on that. But I will also be speaking. Jeff Wamsley, who runs the whole show, along with his family and friends, I always speak last on Sunday. And I'll be talking about, last year I did something, usually I talk about John Keel or Mothman. Last year I did a kind of a Shaver Mystery 101.
Fantastic.
And this year it'll be on the Loch Ness Monster. But it won't be about a cute little plesiosaur wearing a Scottish tam, suitable for postcards. Are you familiar with Holiday, F.W. Holiday? And his writing?
I sure am.
Fascinating stuff. So it'll start out with his journey, from oversized mollusk to paranormal overtones and so forth. His connection with Dr. Donald Olmond, the exorcist, the Anglican priest exorcist, that and also he's supposed to have exorcised the Bermuda Triangle. So this guy was no slouch, But and he called these things, these creatures, out of the Phantom Menagerie, which I love that description. So, but it will go along and go along with his journey, and then he teams up with Randall Pugh, P-U-G-H, who was a veterinarian in Britain, and he and Holiday investigate doveed whales, the doveed enigma, with his strange three-ring circuits of the paranormal in 1977. And again, he wrote Holiday wrote two books. The third one was The Goblin Universe,
It's a great
which he decided he wouldn't publish. Colin Wilson, which eventually resurrected it, believed it was because he was trying to give a blanket explanation for the paranormal, but there were some things that came up like that. Supposedly a picture of a flipper that might have been Nessie, and a lot of controversy there. So he thinks that maybe he thought that Nessie maybe was a flesh and blood creature after all, when he had been pursuing the paranormal end. But then he gets into this doveed whales thing, and there isn't anything that isn't paranormal about that. There's even overtones of folklore, modern day folklore erupting like Jacques Vallee's Passport to Magonia. So people are going to go, this is going to be a wild ride. We're going to start out with Nessie. We're going to hit Ireland with the very small and shallow lakes where they still were seeing these creatures that they call horse eels, and end up in doveed whales. And there'll be a couple exorcisms, in one right in the beginning, and one with Dr. Donald Olmond, where he tries to exorcise. They began to think that Nessie had something evil attached to it. Anyway, it's too much to explain right now. But
Crowley had lived on the
yes,
right?
And Crowley, I don't think Crowley had. A lot of people think that his incantations or whatever sort of resurrected Nessie or whatever. I don't think so. Although, who's Tim Dinsdale? He was the guy. He actually told Holiday at one point he began to believe that Nessie was paranormal, and but he had been a flesh and blood guy for years. But he said supposedly one time he was in a boat not too far off the shore from where Crowley was, and all kinds of phantoms and everything were surrounding him. Nothing attacked him, but it was just the weirdest thing that he experienced, and he blamed Crowley for that. But so anyway, it will end up with Randall Pugh, who survived Holiday. Holiday never saw The Devil Enigma published, but Randall Pugh, according to a woman that knew him, went from UFO investigator to firmly believing that all of this was demonic, and he became very fearful. So it's a very strange, meandering ride, and I don't know how it's going to come across. It'll be late on Sunday when most people are driving home anyway, so they won't have to suffer through it.
I'd love to be there. It's funnily enough, I was just talking to my girlfriend how much I'd love to come to Point Pleasant with two of our daughters, and either during the festival or at another time. But when is the festival this year? When's the month?
I think it's the September 20 and 21. It's however the third weekend falls in September.
See, I'll be at Crossing Realms this year, so I'll miss the festival.
The next weekend, I'll be MC at the Van Meter Visitor Festival in Van Meter, Iowa. So
maybe that's one we should try to get to.
Oh, that would be fun
because that's closer to us. Like Iowa, that's probably. I'm guessing Van Meter's probably not more than 6-7 hours from where I'm at.
It's west of Des Moines.
Yeah, probably about 7-8 hours. Maybe it's not that far.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, that's so. What and when's Van Meter?
The last weekend in September. Always, it's the weekend after the Mothman Festival. That's when in 1903 they were supposed to have seen this sort of a pterodactyl-like creature, but it has some very strange properties, like a light on its beak, and it would exude some kind of a vapor. Fill in your own joke there, but it would cause amnesia, sort of like a time loss thing. So it's almost like, very Keelian, where the manifestation may not be what it really was.
Well, Van Meter might be more possible for me to get to than Mothman this year. And my daughter loves all things dinosaur and pterosaur and everything else, so that might be.
Oh, great.
And look at you. You're like Mothman. You're like Van Meter man. You're like all over the place, Steve.
Well, I've been fascinated by this stuff, as you have, for a long time. And it's John Keel and Jacques Vallee are people, and we have some great people, like Joshua Cutchin and so forth. There are so many good people sort of carrying the mantle for these great thinkers. And fortunately, Jacques Vallee is still with us.
No, it is great that Vallee's here. We're getting towards the end, so it's difficult to go down this path. But there seems to have been somewhat of a change in Vallee. If you compare, his trilogy with what he says in Trinity, the Best Kept Secret, like the idea that he talks about the lure of the physical in I think it's Revelations, or it's one of those three books. But the idea that ufologists tend to fall for anything where there's the potential of physical evidence. And then his most recent book with Paola Harris, Trinity, the Best Kept Secret, seems to be that he falls for a fallacy that he warned about. And I love Vallee, I love all of his writings, but I think that the evidence for the saucer crash in Trinity is scant at best. And certainly I'm not somebody who believes a physical extraterrestrial craft crashed at Roswell, but at least there seems to be far more evidence for the potential of a Roswell crash than there does seem to be for the Trinity crash. So I'm never sure what made Jacques Vallee feel comfortable to assert the reality of the Trinity crash, unless there's something that we're unaware of that he knows that I don't know.
I haven't read that one yet, so I don't know. But,
yeah, you should. It'd be interesting. Yeah, I'd love you to read it, and we could chat about it. Anyway, I don't want to say anything bad about Jacques Vallee, because as for you, as for me, he's a massive influence on my thinking within this field. So are there any websites or anything that you'd like to point people
out? No, just if you type in Steve Ward on Facebook and Point Pleasant, you'll probably find me. I do. My podcast has been on hiatus for a little while. It'll be getting ramped up again. I got some stuff out of the way. The High Strangeness Factor on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Andy Mercer is co-host and producer. And Susie Bastille, who's been a guest on your show several times. The Pugwudgie Whisperer, and an expert in all things Bridgewater Triangle. So we'll be getting back up to speed. And, I'm speaking here and there. I'm allegedly working on a book. The Helm is Sluggish. I do have a book co-authored with Mark Randall, the great graphic artist, Mothman High Strangeness. You can get that from Amazon. He did all the graphic art of the Year of the Garuda, and he and I wrote the pieces. So may I quote my favorite paragraph as best I can from the Mothman Prophecies, with the hopes that people will be led to read it. This is when Keel was on the verge of going to Point Pleasant, and he writes, "The Year of the Garuda was at hand. A force was closing over, a dark force was closing over a little town I had never even heard of, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. In a matter of months, I would be arriving there like some black-suited exorcist, carrying my tattered briefcase, waving the golden cross of science. My life would become intertwined with the people of the Ohio Valley." And I love that particular paragraph.
Steve, that is the perfect ending for a wonderful show. You were a great guest, as you always are. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Always a pleasure, Dean. Always a pleasure.
And until I get to talk to you again, Steve, which hopefully will be in the very near future, and until I get to talk to everybody else out there, which will be same weird time, same weird network next week, Tuesday, 9 p.m. Central, please keep it weird.